One of my earliest memories of watching television is on an old VHS I had, which contained the first episode of the Filmfare series Paddington Bear, created by Michael Bond, who had written a number of books by the time it came to air in the mid 1970s, and made by Ivor Wood and Filmfare. And I watched this episode loads of times to the point where it became comfort. And I used to see the odd 5-minute episode on TV. It was later released on DVD, which I bought and devoured. It was like a 5-minute before bedtime comfort thing. And I loved the style of it. It was just such a comforting program, with a 3D Paddington and a 2D background narrated beautifully by Michael Hordern. And I was delighted late last year when it was announced that Fabulous Films were not only going to be reissuing the original series, they were going to be restoring and remastering in a way that it hasn't had before, probably since it was made, right? Because they went, instead of going to the restorations from the mid 90s, they did something else with it. They went to 16mm film. They scoured the world looking for prints of this, and they scanned from there and restored. And it was, it was an interesting proposition. We didn't know what it was going to look like. And then it was finally released. This is Paddington Bear, the complete collection, series 1 and 2, now fully restored. And this also includes the 1980s specials as well. And what a thing. I sat down, watched it, and it was like watching the show for the first time. It cannot be underestimated how much that restoration has just opened up the entire world. And it is important, to preserve this, because I think as time went on, the old prints were starting to look they were starting to look a little bit faded, and it's about introducing it to a new generation. I mean, technically, I was introduced to it, long after it had been on, like maybe 10 to 20 years afterwards. But time has moved on even further, and when something looks a little bit old and crusty, it doesn't really entice the younger generation. This fixes that. You could almost play this next to the new animated series of Paddington, which is really cool because it keeps kind of the spirit of it. And yeah, I think it holds up incredibly well. The image is incredible. I cannot describe how clear it looks. You feel like you could reach out and touch Paddington. It's like you're there with Lethem Wood and you are seeing it in motion. It does show up some of the sometimes inconsistencies in the animation, and that's what's going to happen when suddenly you're seeing a bunch of other detail, but it doesn't take away from the magic of it. It's just such a lovingly done restoration, and I think, as Barry Leaf in the features here says himself, it's like night and day. And I've seen comments of people saying, "Oh, I bought that, I've got the suitcase," or whatever. This is almost like a different product. It will be like looking at it through completely fresh eyes. When you were watching it, you forget how much white there is in the original, in the first series there. It really pops out at you in this, and you see every detail, and it's marvelous. And a little bit like with the other restorations that have been out, such as Will-O-the-Wisp and the Wombles, the audio is crisp. You hear Mr. Hordern at his best, and Yeah, it still sounds like it was recorded a while ago, but it doesn't sound quite as old as it once did. In addition to the episodes on here, we also have special features, including Paddington Restored, showing you the difference between the original negative and this, essentially. And it's night and day, as Barry Leaf said. There's also a feature with Barry Leaf, Filmfare Animator, where he talks about Paddington and the Wombles, and there's a nice little feature bit at the end of it about Parsley as well. And there's the Marmalade Sandwich feature, which is like a small interview with Michael Bond from the archives. So, yeah, this is Paddington, the complete collection of the Filmfare series. It's a lovely package, and it is quite expensive, but Fabulous Films are, an independent label. They're not really run by anybody bigger. They're not trying to fleece you, basically. It would have taken a lot of time, money, and effort to bring this to fruition. And so the price has to kind of match that. And so, yeah, I think it's worth it. If you are a huge fan of this series, as I am, and you grew up with this and you want to see it looking as good as it can ever look, really, but it could look better. I don't know. I didn't think it could look better than it did before, but they surprised me. Then definitely pick this up. So, yeah, what do you think of this if you've bought it? Do let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't, what is your thoughts on the original series of Paddington? Do you like the art style? Do you like Michael Hordern's narration? Do you like the fact that perhaps it's the closest to the written word that in terms of adaptation? So when compared to the films that came a lot later or the other animated series, this is the closest in tone, in wording, that they've ever got to those original books. Let me know all your thoughts, and I'll see you again for another episode of Vintage Animation Millennial.